Pregame.tv, Vegas runner not with us. He will be with Ken Thompson Friday night breaking down videos when Marco is out of town. So if you like VR and who doesn't like VR, stay tuned for that. I'm going to give you the national champion in college football here, and I think I got a great prop bet I'm going to be betting on. And I might add, remember when the Miami Heat were against the field in the NBA playoffs, and I think the Heat were pick'em, and I know VR jumped on that bet and he got them minus 110. Remember that? And people were saying, how can they be favored against 15 other teams?
I don't know if they were pick'em, but I know VR got a good line.
Yeah, and then you blink and they were in the semi after their pretty much their expected easy wins against Milwaukee and Chicago. You blinked and all of a sudden they were like minus 240. And when going into the semis, because people realized, oh, that's right, they don't have to beat 15 other teams. They really only have to beat 2 others because it was almost a lock that they were going to be in the semifinals.
Yeah, Chicago wasn't a good matchup for them, and Indy was a tough matchup, but I thought we were talking football. We
are. And so where I'm getting at, there's a proposition out there, and there's a text going on right now saying, get me down on that. Sounds good, Fez. Who is going to win the national championship? Specifically, is the SEC going to win the national championship, yes or no? And it's minus 110 in either direction. And at first glance, you think, wait a minute, I get Ohio State, I get the Big Ten, I get the Pac-12, I get USC, I get Oregon, I get the Big 12 and all their Texases and the Oklahomas and the Oklahoma States, not to mention the Notre Dames and, heck, I guess the Rutgers and the Navies and the Northwesterns of the world. On top of it, how can the SEC be the favorite here? What do you think?
Well, who's won the national championship the last 7, 8 years?
Not one. Not 2.
And LeBron wasn't even on these teams.
Not 4, not 5, not 6. We're talking 7 times in a row. Now imagine if you had I'm trying to think of like a heads-up match, and 2 guys were playing each other, and one guy won 7 straight times like in tennis. He would be like minus 380 at the very least to win the 8th straight time, or boxing. And so here's a case where you literally have gotten one guy, the SEC has won 7 in a row, and yet the line is pick'em. Has the SEC gotten worse at football this year than they were in prior years?
What I take a look at and things like that is, number one, power ratings. I know you're not. I'm a fan of that 100 top team. Best that ever was is 100. Yours is, you like the 0.
I like the average team being 0.
Okay.
And then make the Alabama 24 or 26, whatever they are, right?
Well, I've got 6 SEC teams ranked at 87 or higher. I have 7 non-SEC teams ranked at 87 or higher. But you've got to take a look at how these teams are ranked in the polls before the season starts. If you're number 1, if you're Alabama, and Alabama wins every game by 1 point, Alabama's playing in the national championship.
Lock.
No doubt about it. Alabama loses a game by 3 points and loses a game by 7 points. One other team that doesn't play in the SEC loses 1 game, Alabama's back in the national championship.
Unless it's a really weird case where it's an Oregon that loses week 1. And looks like a world beater the rest of the way. Absolutely. And that's where I'm getting at is that I've been talking about, let's do the math about this. And I agree with you that if there's like 14 teams that can win the national championship, maybe half are in the SEC, and that's where we're getting the 50-50. But Alabama is so much more likely than anybody else to win the championship. And also, if somebody is able to win the SEC and knock Alabama out, they don't necessarily even knock them out. Maybe both will play in the championship. I think it's more likely we get 2 SEC teams playing than none. I think it would really take
I agree.
A strange thing to happen to have none. And I know even if I'm wrong, and even if like out of nowhere Ohio State goes 12-0 and they get in there against Georgia or somebody, I'm not worried. Because even if Ohio State should be favored in that game, they won't be. Because everyone's going to see what I'm talking about now. They're going to say that I remember the Notre Dame game when Lacey just annihilated, Te'o. It looked like he'd been going to Pizza Hut every day for the month before. And they're going to bet on the Georgia, or they're going to bet on whoever shows up out of the SEC, South Carolina. If they got there and blink in South Carolina, like Auburn was against Oregon, they're going to be laying 3.5 right before the game kicks off.
Yeah, when you get an Ohio State team, and I think they've got a very good chance of going undefeated. They're going to be favored in every game they play.
I don't.
Well, they're only going to be like a 5-point favorite at Michigan. Northwestern's not going to be an easy game.
Purdue beat them last year.
Yeah. No, they didn't, because they didn't lose a single game last year.
Technically, I guess they won, but they were down 8 with 1 minute to play, and they had to drive the field.
Yeah,
everything had to happen. So I'm saying the fact you beat Indiana by 3, I know they're up 18 late, and you should have lost to Purdue. Ohio State, very fortunate last year.
Well, the thing about Ohio State, and I think Ohio State's got a very good team, and as I said, they could go undefeated. When it gets down to the end of the season, you take a look at who Alabama's beaten in that SEC. You take a look at who Ohio State has beaten. There is a huge drop-off in the Big Ten this year from Ohio State down, unless there's going to be one team that just comes out and surprises everybody. Because we kind of talked about this before the radio show today. The Big Ten is not going to be very good this year.
Yeah, and I love the fact that Alabama gets A&M early in the year, so they could even lose that game. They run the table, and I agree that there's a sweat, because if Oklahoma State goes undefeated and Oregon goes undefeated, Alabama's going to be on the out. They're not going to get in. But as long as the undefeated team is a Boise or a team like that, Alabama's going to jump them completely. It's going to have to be. It's going to have to be a team that's in the top 8 that goes undefeated before the year starts to stay ahead of Alabama. And we saw that last year with what was going on. And I know like a Kansas State could come out of nowhere, and teams like that. But the bottom line is, I really think that I really only need to get an SEC team into that title game, and I'm going to be, if it's Alabama, they're going to be laying 7 to 10.
Virtually any SEC team based on past history is going to be favored in the national championship game.
Yeah, and I think it'd be very hard not to make the case. And so, like I said, I don't like to think of it as like I've got, the 12 teams in the SEC and everyone else has 112 teams. I like to think of it, I got 7 teams, the top 7 teams in the SEC against your best 7. One of those 14 teams is going to win it all, more than likely. And my 7's way better than your 7, especially on the upper end.
And because of the strength of the SEC, one of those top 7 could lose and still make it. But you go down the list. I mean, you take a look at Ohio State, Oklahoma State, Florida State, USC, Oregon, Stanford. Any of those teams lose a game, they very well could not regain, unless maybe an Oregon loses to Stanford or vice versa.
They need 2 losses out of the SEC powerhouses. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to make this one official. SEC has kicked everyone's butt, including the overrated Big Ten. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, 7 times. 8 is enough. We're going to roll with it. There's lots of mathematical reasons to support this. This is a bad prop. It's available at William Hill. I think some other places have put it up. And some people are actually betting the other side, because I know it went up to -125. It's back down to -110. Go ahead and bet the SEC to win the national championship, smile all the way to the bank, and then when they're laying 8 in the title game, you want to go back and go ahead and play Stanford +260 against whoever they're playing. Go right ahead. Lock in a profit. It is a free play and a very strong one.
Or you can just take the 8 points and go to the middle.
Whoa, take the money and run. Yeah, that middling didn't work so well for those who took the Irish +29 or whatever in the national title games. Actually, how much did they lose by? 28? 42-14?
It was ugly.
It was really ugly. That's a good, that was a good example of and we'll be talking in videos. We're going to do a video, pregame.tv, about live wagering right before football season starts. But that truly was an example where the way to get at that game was like early on in the first drive, when Lacey was just gaining 9 yards of play, lay Alabama -12. Once they crossed midfield, it was clear that this was just going to be an outright butt kicking. And after the first touchdown, lay the 14 with Alabama. I think that had outstanding value. I don't know of anyone who didn't watch that first half of the first quarter that didn't say this game is over. So be checking out all the good stuff. Pregame.tv. We'll be here all summer. Bryan Leonard, Steve Fezzik, and returning shortly, Vegas Runner.